Welcome back, everyone, to Coach to You. I'm your host, Coach Regina. And on today's topic, we will discuss your struggles are not for nothing. Now, guys, I want you to stay with me to the end of this podcast because this is a very timely discussion that I believe is going to be able to help you answer some questions as to why certain things occur in your life. Okay? Now, before I get started, I want to go ahead and give my disclaimer. Although I'm a student of psychology, I'm not a licensed health professional. All content and information on this channel stems from my own personal experience and extensive research and is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered professional medical advice. If you feel you have a mental health condition, seek the guidance of a medical professional. All right, guys, so we're just going to go ahead and jump in today. And again, I want you to stay with me to the end. And if you're new to my channel, be sure to like and subscribe on this video, okay? All right, so today we will discuss and explore how every particular challenge and hardship is a part of a bigger picture. Today we'll dive in what it means to see struggles as a part of a grander plan. Now, for the sake of time, we will use the struggle of recognizing why certain difficulties arise. In this particular instance, we'll discuss shadow, but difficulties can be anything, okay? We'll get a chance to kind of dive into different parts of difficulties, but for the most part, that's where the aim is. We'll be discussing that aspect, okay? I believe that our struggles often serve as a catalyst for growth, pushing us beyond our comfort zone and revealing strengths that we never knew actually possessed. At the time when you're dealing with difficulties, that's not the case. Think about a time when you face a significant challenge. As you reflect, what did you learn about yourself through the experience? I know for me, there were times where I would have, certain breakdowns, difficulties within my friendships and different things like that. And one of them was also when I lost my job. It was unexpectedly. I mean, if you really, I mean, I kind of was a bad employee, but, in hindsight, it was unexpected in that regard. Okay. At the time, though, it did feel devastating, but it forced me to reevaluate my career path and ultimately led me to start my own business as well as my podcast and write books as an author. Something I had dreamed about for a long time, but was actually too afraid to pursue. It's almost like, I was utilizing the ability to go to work every day as a means to why I couldn't get things done. And ultimately, being fired from those jobs, it serves as the catalyst for me to do that inner self discovery to determine those parts of myself that I did not know exist, as I mentioned earlier. So essentially, it is something that we recognize that may be apparent, but it's not always apparent. So often the meaning isn't immediately apparent when you're going through things, right? It might be about developing empathy, learning to support others, addressing our shadow parts, or simply building inner strength to navigate future challenges. Now, I mentioned to you that we're going to discuss the shadow on in this particular area. But like I mentioned, it can be anything. If you find yourself constantly dealing with people feeling like you're not supporting them, or if you feel like that you're not strong in different areas, and it's always an apparent area of weakness that continues to come up for you, these are parts of your life that may be trying to show you something that needs to be addressed. Okay. Even if we can't see why in the moment, we can choose to focus on how we respond and grow through it. As I mentioned, I began to take time rather than just immediately going back to a job. What I did was I began to take time. I asked myself, Gina, why is it that you keep leaving jobs all the time or being dismissed for jobs in that regard? And in that, I was able to take time to examine that I didn't give my 100% at those jobs. That's the first thing I began to notice. Another thing is, being submissive to people in authority. I noticed that that was also an issue for me as well. Over time, as I got older, I recognized that that stemmed from my childhood, but ultimately, it was basically me bringing this sense of awareness to myself to understand why there were a constant issue within my work experience, okay, and work ethics. So, I began to take time to evaluate those parts of myself and recognize that I just didn't want to work for anyone anymore, regardless of the role that I played versus the inability to feel safe and secure. I recognized that there was a part of me that wanted more. Okay. when you look into this specific, as I mentioned earlier, take time to just evaluate the part of yourself when you experience something and you recognize that it was something that was reoccurring. Did it strike something in you, a memory that you recognize that it's something that I just recognize I need to deal with, but for whatever reason you did not? Okay, when we comes to the realization of shadow has a tendency to cause recurrent cycles and patterns within us that continue to come up until we address them. For me, it was about shifting my perspective from victim to active participant in my own story. I recognize that I have the ability to choose if I want to go to work a 9 to 5 versus me wanting to be my own business owner. So I began to do that inner work to recognize that I could do it. I began to save money. Okay. I began to create vision boards, seeing myself owning my own business as well. Another part of it was I had to choose what I actually wanted to do because I had worked for someone for so long. I really didn't know what it is I wanted to do. But there was a caveat to that. When I began to examine the jobs that I kept going to, they were more convenient for me, is what I perceived at the time. However, what I ended up finding out, it was a part of me, an innate passion that was lying dormant that I wanted to activate in myself. The jobs that I kept going to was restaurants. I worked at every restaurant that you can name, and ultimately I recognized that I think I want to own my own restaurant, and I really believe that I could do it. And so that's what became the catalyst for me discovering the parts of myself that I wanted to evolve. Okay, so another question I often pondered is how much of our struggles are self-imposed, and how much is simply the nature of life. Now, this is a very important question because, as I just mentioned, I recognize that I wasn't the best employee. Okay, I recognize that there was a area where superiority was an issue within the workplace for people in authority and different things like that. So basically, by me pondering on that, I was able to recognize that a lot of it was self-imposed. Okay, but at the same time, there was this other aspect of it where there was something trying to build more in me because I put off an energy of unfulfillment. And oftentimes, this is what brings us to other catalysts in our life. Your body has a energy, it has a chemistry that tends to make it feel either comfortable or normal or abnormal. Okay. And I think when you're sitting with yourself and you gain the awareness that, I'm just not comfortable here anymore. That can be the first trigger, is that you are recognizing that there's something different about you versus your counterparts. Okay. So in that regard, it could be a combination of both. Okay. Sometimes we create our own struggles through negative patterns or limiting beliefs. Other times, life throws us curveballs that are completely out of our control. Okay. Now, when you look at it from this perspective, the key is to develop self-awareness and learn to differentiate between the two, so we can take responsibility for what we can control and accept and what we cannot. Once you do this, you take yourself from being a victim in your circumstances or being trapped in a victimizing mindset to being able to take control of your life in this regard. Okay. Once you operate from a victimizing mindset, this becomes a hindrance because once a person is a victim, they are no longer in control of the circumstances. They are now privy to being controlled by external circumstances, and then they have to kind of navigate that complexity from that mindset. If you take responsibility from your situation for your situation and acknowledge the role you've played in it, as I mentioned earlier, for me, I recognized the type of employee I was being, as well as the issue relating to authority. Now, it didn't matter at the time that a lot of this stuff stemmed from my childhood, but it ultimately gave me some sort of a foundation to be able to build upon by taking the responsibility that was necessary for that particular season in my life. Apart from shifting my perspective, what I have found to ease the matter of life's difficulties is recognizing my role in attracting certain experiences. This is also very important as well. Because if you're constantly waking up and you're going to a job and you feel this invalidness about the job, or you feel this let me give you an example. this regret, like I wish I hadn't have to be here, or like feeling, downtrodden, if you will, like that. These particular emotions act as an attractor field to invite more of certain experiences into your life. It's not, you know, life doing it to you at that point is law, okay? And basically the law is says like attracts like. So basically you can say from a conscious perspective, from a certain percentage of the time, I want better in life. But the other percentage of the day is being ran by your subconscious programs, limiting beliefs and negative emotions. And so this here acts as the gate that is blocking you from being able to have anything more in life, that essentially will cause you to have to address those emotions from a place of perspective. Okay. And so, in order to do that, you have to be able to gain a deeper perspective. You have to be able to say, okay, I recognize that this is happening to me because I want better in life. That alone, that shift alone tells the brain that you're not a victim. That is a very powerful choice to make, okay? Because if victimizing feels good to the body and you're more adept at blaming others, then you'll find yourself wanting to stay in that realm of experiences because it's better for the chemistry of the body. Now, here's the problem with that. It may feel good for the moment, right? But from a long-term perspective, if you don't address those issues, they will become reoccurrent. That's how I was able to lose job after job, because there was the awareness there that there was something underlining that was going on. But because I had stayed in a victimizing mindset of, they don't like me, they're trying to trap me, or they're trying to do this, and etc. I could not grow from that standpoint. Now, if you're honest with yourself, you know people like this. If you're not that person yourself, where when you go through things in life, oftentimes the first thing we begin to do is we begin to look outside of ourselves for someone to blame, to be able to help understand what's happening. It is a normal thing. It comes from the primitive mind. Our need to survive. That survival instinct kicks in, and we look for a culprit, someone to attack. Now, again, this may be beneficial for the long term, but at some point in your life, you will have to take the responsibility for what's going on and the challenges that arise within your life. As I begin to examine myself, right, and understand that I had allowed some of these experiences to come into my life and that I had essentially attracted them, it began to give me this sense of wherewithal that I could fix it, right? As I began to examine my internal state, or particular season that I may have been in, I believe that what I had come to understand is that it was necessary for those particular situations to occur. Because we are essentially creatures of evolution, and oftentimes our soul's quest to evolve allows us to have to address shadow aspects of ourselves that surface. They help us to be able to understand that there is a little child in you that is crying out for attention. Okay. They help us to be able to see that there's a wounded person that was never taken care of. They help us to be able to see that there's a mothering in you, and that's your need to nurture and protect everyone else. Every time we get a chance to look at these parts of ourselves, they're not for us to feel angry, or, an emotion may occur once you discover what's there. But ultimately, what we're challenged to do is we're challenged to integrate these parts of ourselves in order to be able to use them as fuel for our next journey in life. Okay. And you may say, well, Coach Regina, what does that mean exactly? Let's say that you discovered that you have a tendency to become angry all the time. Okay, that anger may stem from uh let's see, you look at others and you see that they have more value, whatever the case may be. Okay, you can ask yourself, what am I afraid to face? First of all, you need to, there's the shadow, there is comparison, the envy or comparison of other lives. This is one reason why social media can be so daunting, because you're constantly scrolling and you're looking at other people's lives. And that temporary moment of that click that you see there, that is not that is only a facade. It is not the true aspect of their whole life. Here's why. Because if you're going through struggles and hardships in your life, they are too. It is the nature of reality that we all go through it to go through certain matters to help us evolve. But social media helps you to see things from only one lens, that moment. Okay? People are not they're not putting on there when they're broken, they're heartbroken, they're falling apart, etc. They're only wanting you to see the parts of them that mean and matters to something to them in that day. Okay? So comparison profits you nothing in that regard. Being able to have the life that you desire comes from you being able to recognize your own parts and places that you desire to make whole, not comparison. So being able to use that fuel that comes from anger or comparison, jealousy, use that fuel to be the momentum to help you discover what you want in your life. And that's what I had to do. Rather than seeing myself as a bad employee or a bad worker, I recognized that there were better employees that showed up on time, that took, more responsibility for their actions and things like that. They were, people that did, different parts within projects and got recognized for them and things like that. So I decided to say, okay, I can do this in my own job, in my own field. I can do this, not in my own job, but in my own business. I can actually, be a self-starter. I can be a motivator. I can be someone that takes responsibility. I created this business. Therefore, I can utilize this as fuel to be the person that would drive this business to be successful. And ultimately that's what I did. Okay. I think a lot of times people misunderstand shadow. They look at it as something negative, or they assume it's all about darkness, okay? But it's really about acknowledging the full spectrum of our being, including the parts we've disowned or suppressed. When everything started, as I began my healing journey in 2023, when things started to come up, that was really, really difficult. There were shadow parts of myself that I had to address that ultimately helped me to realize that there was a little child there, okay, that was never heard, okay? That is what led to me wanting to talk incessantly. And, people felt invalid when I would say things that stepped on their toes. I recognized that there was the wounded person there, the person that had been, abused and things like that. And so this is what brought about the healer. Okay, there was the person of me that was the blamer that didn't take responsibility in there. So therefore, that played a role in all these different parts that I recognized that existed. Okay, and as I began to integrate them, I began to recognize that they also play a role. The communicator, the healer, the comforter, right? So in that regard, when I started to start noticing these strong emotional triggers and judgments in myself and others, it placed me in a situation where I wanted to make myself whole. Then I use other tools such as journaling, meditation, self-talk. I did a lot of self-talk to integrate the shadow parts. Okay, it allowed me to explore feelings that were in myself and asking why. And I'm not gonna lie, guys, that came up for me. Why? Why did I go through abuse? Why did I suffer different things like that? I went through those moments where it was just me in the shadow there communicating. I remember screaming out cathartically, I was a child. Why did I go through abandonment? There was a lot of stuff that came up, but ultimately I I was able to heal. When I began to uncover the shame and the repressed traits, I finally was able to work to accept and integrate these parts of myself for greater self awareness and wholeness. I stopped apologizing for moments when I would talk incessantly and simply became aware of it as the observer. Okay, and I would be able to utilize an opportunity to say, okay, what was there that was coming up? Were you excited? Did you feel safe when you were around this person? Did you sense something in them that you wanted to heal? All of this became an intricate part of my own self discovery because, essentially, according to the mirror principles, what you see in others is a shadow reflection in yourself. So when we're looking at people and we're judging them and we're blaming them and we're criticizing them, we need to look at the components that are deeply held within them that are actually parts of ourself that we want to fix. When we do that, we can look at it from a place of compassion. We can recognize that the things that are coming up in our life are not for nothing. They matter. and they are part of us becoming the whole person that our soul's quest was needed from the beginning. Okay, so to wrap this up, bring a little summary of observation. Okay, integrating the shadow. Remember, I told you that when life's challenges come up, they're not for nothing. Okay, but recognizing that if you're in a place where you need to build inner resilience, learn to support others, navigate future challenges, or you're just in a down season of emotional distraught, whatever the case may be, check within yourself first. Examine what is this season or this circumstance trying to tell me. Release judgment. Be compassionate with yourself. Recognize that you and everyone else is doing the best that they can. Okay? Pay attention to the triggers. Notice what irritates you, whether it's anger, fear, you're embarrassed to be around others. Often, like I mentioned, this serves as a mirror of repressed parts of yourself that you need to begin to address. Okay? Next, reflect on strong reactions. Ask yourself, why did I react so intensely to this situation? What was this trying to tell me? If certain people irritate you, maybe you need to ask yourself, what is it in that person that I notice I would like to have? That is a very courageous question because at the end of the day, you don't know that person. In many regards, we really don't. We think we know people. We only see the image that people want us to see. So when you feel irritated or, angst about what you notice in a person, this is an opportunity to examine whether or not there's an envious trait, a jealousy, something that you recognize in that person, or something that is within yourself that is repressed that needs to come about for healing. Last, use journaling. This is something that I like to do. I do a lot of writing to myself. I spoke to the inner child. I wrote a letter to the ego parts of myself that I felt was blocking me from growing and becoming the best version of myself. Ask, what qualities do I judge in others that I secretly desire? Or when do I feel most dishonest about myself? See, a lot of times what we don't realize is that we wear a mask. We wear a facade in different environments around different people. In essence, you're not the same person that you are at the grocery store as you are at the club. You're not the same person at your workplace as you are on weekends at church. So these masks that we wear are not who we are. They're not our true identity. They're essentially personas. There are egoic traits that we have adopted to help us navigate this 3D reality. Being able to understand that that is okay. Egos are not bad or good per se. They are just simply tools to help us to live about in this world. Not identifying them as who you are becomes the catalyst for growth and inner healing. This is where my journey of self discovery came from. I recognized that even though there was the little child that was there, that was the communicator that's there, the wounded healer that's there, I recognized that these were not who I am. I recognize that there is a pure essence that resides within me. And that purest essence allows me to be the observer. And when circumstances come up, whether they be addressing the shadow or whether it be life's difficulties or you are navigating a season, when these things come up, I am able to step outside of the situation as the observer. And as the observer, I ask, what is it that I am supposed to learn? I want to thank you guys for watching. If you stay to the end of this video, give me a like, a thumbs up, and let me know if this is additional content that you would like to listen to from future references. My name is Coach Regina. Thank you all. Take care.